Alright guys, you can call up angry mobs. I know I'm about to be trashing a Zelda game for the next couple minutes, but just so you know, I actually like the game. I actually have like 3 copies of it, so I probably like it. But not the beginning. Beginning's awful. That's probably why I haven't played through it 3 times. Alright, so let's break that down real quick. So, basically, the idea of this here intro to entrance thing I'm doing is that this is just from when you boot up a new file to the entrance of the first dungeon. I'm not taking any speedrun tactics, and this is from the point of view of I've played through the game once before, and the most recent time was to get opinions for the intro here. Also, I won't be skipping cutscenes, as I feel that's something someone who hasn't played a game in a while is going to do. Also, there are going to be some minor spoilers regarding certain mechanics, whether or not they show up again when I wrap things up at the end. So, just to let you know, nothing really story relevant here. So, the game starts off with Link and his friend here chatting, setting up some nice foreshadowing for a game that managed to sell like 8.85 million Wii units, a holdover for the people who hadn't had a Wii yet, and shipping about 1.5 Wii U's, and somehow about 1.5 million Amiibler sales. Don't really know how they did it, but it did. Then the next day, Link's boss shows up and tells him to go goat wrangling, so you have to go get his horse from the pool where the cutscene happened, where you meet Epona and Ilia. After an awkward horseback romp through town, you meet these guys and then go goat wrangling. Literally the worst part of the intro. And by intro, I mean the entire game, because it never shows up again. It's pointless. So, after that, the local kiddos are introduced to you under the guise of, hey look, here's a slingshot because we forgot to program anything that uses the pointer this early in the game. These characters being Mallow, Beth, Colin, and this guy I can't be bothered to remember the name of. In your quest for the slingshot, you end up having to go talk to this guy to learn how to use the bird grass that never shows up again to get this basket for Uli here. Then, she gives you the fishing rod so you can catch 1 or 2 fish depending on the version of the game you have. Then a cat steals it and you can finally buy the slingshot for 40 rupees from this lady. After showing off your super pointer skills, you realize you still don't have a sword yet. Then you go get it, and then you get to do the sword fighting tutorial, which is honestly kind of really annoying on the Wii one because the motion controls aren't that accurate. Then one of the kids goes missing, and you have to go find him. So you actually get to use the sword and a lantern you'll pick up along the way to go burn through some webs and fight bad guys. But what's that? Is that the first dungeon? Nope, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're done, you get to go back home now. Now, remember how I mentioned that goat minigame never shows up again? Well, I lied, because you do it one more time for reasons unknown, and then it actually never shows up again. Then Link's girly friend gets mad at him, so you have to go walk all the way back over to that pool to talk to her again. But then everyone gets kidnapped. Oh yeah, and then Link turns into like a wolf or something too. Then Link's in the pound for a couple seconds before meeting the character that made everyone wonder why the series is even about these 2 losers right here. Then you go through this like waterway area where everything kind of looks the same, so you just start randomly pulling on chains. Some of them unleash enemies, some of them, actually progress what you're supposed to do, and it all looks the same. That's bad game design right there. Then you get introduced to Wolf Link's platforming mechanics, but you can't actually do that until you fail first. Then you're thrown in an area where there's a bunch of bottomless pits. You realize Wolf Link attacks by jumping, and there's a bunch of flying enemies, so you can kind of see how those don't really get along that well. Then you meet Princess Zelda and get some exposition before being dropped back off at home. Then Midna tells you to get a sword and shield by breaking and entering not once, but twice, thus leading to one of the best cutscenes in the game. Then you learn from Space Goat if you want to be a real boy again and get rid of the shadowy twilightness, so you can stay a real boy, you gotta get rid of these buggy boys here, who are just found in areas where you've already been. Then after getting rid of the twilight, you finally get to go to the first dungeon. So, you're walking down the path, not expecting anything new, and then there's this purple mist. And a monkey steals your lantern. You then have to follow the monkey, and if you get too far behind, you've got to restart. But in the end, if you get too far ahead, the monkey stops moving. But then if you're me, your game crashes here, and then you gotta redo it all over again. All because you need 5 more minutes of gameplay. Then after chatting with Skeleton Man, you finally get to enter the first dungeon, and according to my records, this took about 2 hours and 18 minutes. Forgot to mention this earlier, but there is a point where you learn an attack that can later be used to open these things for teleporting. So, just to wrap things up, my first problem is that the game just takes its sweet time doing anything at the beginning. It takes about half an hour before you get a sword, and then about another half hour before you get to turn into the wolf. Then there's yet another hour before you go into the first dungeon. Then the game just likes to introduce a lot of mechanics that really don't get used again or don't show up till much later into the game. Off the top of my head, the slingshot was just thrown in to show off the pointer. Horseback riding is neat, but is good for all about 45 seconds in such a small area. The horse whistle grass is neat, but you don't really have that much space to lose Epona at this part of the game. The mist kind of shows up in a different form near the very end of the game. Then fishing isn't relevant to progressing until halfway through the game. Now, my biggest issue here is actually all of the backtracking you do so early on. So here is where you start off compared to the rest of the map. Now, having a relatively small starting area at the beginning of the game isn't bad, except that you comb through this area at least 3 different times. This gets the player tired of where they start off before the game even really begins. And each of the more prominent times when you have to re-explore an area, you have to slow down. When getting the sword and shield, you have to be a little stealthy. When getting rid of Twilight, you have to search for these bugs. When actually going to the dungeon, you have to stop and wait for the monkey. My biggest complaint here is that it finally feels like the game is letting the player move at their own pace before arbitrarily stopping them. I think the intro could have been more streamlined if firstly they got rid of the goat minigame. Then, their kidnapping could be rewritten so that Link thinks that the first dungeon is a sort of base of operations, giving him a reason to head that way in the first place, then to be taken into the Twilight, introducing the wolf form, Zelda, and Midna. And by locking off the area that gets covered in Twilight until after Link has done this, it gives the player a reason to actually explore and look for the shadow bugs, making the area seem a little less stale by the time they actually get to the dungeon. Then Link getting the better sword and the shield could easily fit before, as he needs some sort of weapon to go save them, or after, as he's already lost the weapon that he had. Though, to the game's credit, it does do a good job of building these characters up so that you care about them once they go missing. The game also does a pretty decent job of introducing mechanics that you will use later, even if maybe it's not the best timing for it. I'll also give it props for giving the sense of scale the story has early on, something that Windwaker takes a bit longer to do. Overall, I like the game, just not the intro. So, thanks for your time. If you liked the video, you should comment, like, and subscribe if you want to see more. You should also share it if you want other people to see more, and then I'll have more motivation to make more. That'll be great. Next time, I'm probably going to talk about the intro to Zelda Wind Waker, the other Zelda game that was for the GameCube that got remade on the Wii U.